Let me take you back not just in time, but in feeling, in temperature, in the slow thrum of a lazy summer that should have belonged to childhood and ended up belonging to something else entirely. I was 12 that year, old enough to know better, but young enough to let curiosity run the show. We lived on the edge of town, on the sort of lot where the grass grew wild and the trees bent close enough to tap the windows when the wind got hungry. My brother's treehouse was the centerpiece of that landscape, a jagged little box hammered together from reclaimed lumber, perched high in the tangled arms of a pine older than our father's memory. For years, I'd watched from below as he and his friends, the so-called Sky Club, vanished through the hatch and pulled the rope ladder up behind them, snatching bits of freedom I could only imagine. They had rules. They recited them like a spell. No parents. No girls. No exceptions. It was meant to be a safe haven. A place for secrets and dares and, supposedly, the sort of jokes you weren't supposed to repeat at dinner. From the ground, I tried to picture what that looked like. Card games. Scuffed sneakers knocking against plywood. Or maybe just long silences punctuated by the wind in the pine needles, the kind of quiet you only notice when it's gone. But that summer, the rules changed. Or maybe the treehouse changed first, and the rules only tried and failed to keep up. It started subtle. A missing laugh, a light that never flicked on, the familiar creak of footfalls above us gone silent. My brother Dylan, 2 years my senior, and twice as distant, stopped talking about the club. He mumbled maintenance when the rope ladder vanished, but wouldn't meet my eye. His friends, usually a pack of noisy shadows darting through the yard, started drifting off before dusk, their faces pale and uncertain. I asked him what was wrong, once. He shrugged. "Treehouse needs time to settle," he said. As if a pile of splintered boards could shift its bones like a living thing. But I felt it too, a heaviness, a weighting. The treehouse looked different that summer. Not older, but somehow more awake. As if it had been caught napping for years and was finally blinking into a kind of watchful consciousness. I remember the night everything shifted. The memory has teeth, it's sharp, precise, and cold. I was on my way to bed, pausing at the window to watch the moonlight spill across the backyard. The treehouse crouched in its branches, silent, and for a moment, I thought I saw a shape pass behind the warped glass of its one crooked window. Not my brother. Not any boy I recognized. Just a shadow, too small and too fast. I told myself I imagined it, but the feeling lingered. You know how a room can feel crowded, even when you're alone. That's what our backyard became. The shadows grew longer. The birds stopped perching in the branches. Sometimes, late at night, I'd hear something moving above, so soft it could have been a dream or a memory of one. I've always believed rules are made to be tested, especially when they don't make sense. The rope ladder was gone, but a second one, half rotten and hidden behind the old tool shed, waited for someone to find it. I did. And on a day so hot the air itself seemed to buzz, I carried it across the yard, propped it against the lowest branch, and began to climb. Each rung groaned under my weight, each step up felt like breaking a law older than words. The tree bark scraped my palms, sap stuck to my skin. Above me, the treehouse door yawned open, a mouth or a warning, I couldn't tell which. Inside, the air was different, staler, heavier, the scent of sweat and old wood and something underneath, sour and metallic. The floor was littered with bottle caps and candy wrappers, but most of all, with dust so thick it muffled my footsteps. And there, curled up in the far corner, was a girl. She didn't belong. Or maybe she belonged more than any of us ever had. She sat with her knees drawn up, her hair hanging over her face, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. When I stepped inside, she didn't flinch. Didn't even look up, at first. "Hi," I whispered, as if the treehouse might overhear an object. Nothing. I edged closer, noticing the pale, waxy quality of her skin, the way her eyes, when they finally flickered up to meet mine, looked glassy and old. Not in the way that means wisdom, but in the way that means someone has seen too much. "What's your name?" I tried again. A shrug. A tiny nod. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. The silence was overwhelming. It wasn't awkwardness, it was pressure, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I wanted to run, but I couldn't, not until I understood. I glanced around, suddenly aware of details I'd missed, the initials carved into the wall, not all of them my brother's, the old calendar pinned beside the window, June, but the wrong year, a heap of broken toys in the corner. I touched the floor and felt the vibrations, heartbeat slow, but steady. I told myself I was being dramatic, but every instinct screamed that the girl wasn't the only thing hiding up here. I tried again. "Are you okay?" She finally spoke, barely. "It's safer if you don't ask questions." Her voice was brittle as frost, and for a moment, I thought I heard another voice, softer, layered underneath, echoing hers. It was impossible, but it made my skin crawl. I left, stumbling down the ladder and running for home, certain that I was being watched. When I reached the house, I turned. She was at the window now, watching me with those hollow eyes. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak, every sigh of the wind in the branches, felt like a message. My brother found me pacing the hallway, and for the first time in months, he looked as scared as I felt. "Stay away from the treehouse," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "It's not safe." "Who is she?" I demanded. He shook his head. "It's not just her. There's something else. Something that's always been there. We thought the rules would keep it out. But rules are just words." He told me, then, about the Sky Club, about the first summer, the dares, the night when they found names scratched deep in the wood, names none of them recognized. About how sometimes, when the sun set just right, they'd hear laughter, faint, childish, but not coming from any of them. I tried to let it go, but the feeling followed me. I saw her everywhere, in the windows, in the mirror, in the dreams that left me sweating and breathless. The backyard became a territory of dread. My brother's friends stopped coming by. The air in our house thickened with things unsaid. One night, the wind picked up, rattling the branches until it sounded like the tree itself was trying to speak. I lay in bed, heart racing, and heard the soft, rhythmic thump of footsteps, light, deliberate, on the treehouse roof. I wanted to believe it was an animal. I knew it wasn't. Curiosity is a sickness, and I had it bad. The next afternoon, when the house was empty, I crept out. I told myself it was for answers, for closure, but really, I just wanted to know what waited in the shadows. I climbed again. The girl was gone, but the room felt denser, packed with invisible presence. I found new carvings on the wall, names and dates, some fresh, some so worn they were almost illegible. In the far corner, beneath a moldy rug, my hand brushed something hard. A trapdoor. The boards groaned as I lifted it, dust billowing out. Below, darkness, dense and waiting. I hesitated. But something pulled me down. I slid through the opening, into a space barely tall enough to crouch in. The air was cold and damp. Boxes lined the walls, old toys, books with crumbling pages, and, in the very back, a faded photograph. Children posed in front of the treehouse, their faces grinning, except, every eye was scratched out. And at the center of the group, unmistakable even in shadow, was the girl. I brought the photo into the light, studying the names written on the back. Some matched the ones on the walls. Some were strangers. My brother's was there, too. A sudden noise above, scraping, a gasp. I scrambled out, heart in my throat, and found her standing by the window, staring at the photo in my hand. She doesn't like it when you go down there, she said, voice so hollow it barely sounded human. Who's she? Her gaze slid to the corner, to the darkest part of the treehouse. For a moment, I thought I saw another figure, a blur, a shadow, but it was gone before I could focus. She never left. And she won't let us go. I fled. I barely remember the descent, only the cold certainty that something ancient and hungry was watching, waiting for someone else to break the rules. At home, I found my brother in the kitchen, pale and silent. I showed him the photograph. He nodded, eyes wet. That's why we made the rules, he said. It was never about keeping you out. It was about keeping us safe. But it didn't work, I whispered. No, he said. It never does. That night, we sat by the window, watching the treehouse sway in the wind. We didn't speak. We didn't need to. Some things don't have endings. They just become part of the landscape, waiting for someone new to stumble in. The days that followed crawled by in a strange, sleepless fog. Shadows lengthened across the floorboards, pooling in the corners of every room. The treehouse loomed, a dark monolith that seemed to grow more oppressive with each passing hour. I tried to stay away, but the photograph burned in my mind, the girl's scratched out eyes haunting my dreams. My brother, Dylan, was a wreck. He jumped at every sound. Sometimes I'd catch him staring out the window, lips moving in silent argument with ghosts only he could see. At dinner, Mom would ask if we wanted to invite friends over, and Dylan would shake his head, jaw clenched, eyes never leaving his plate. Dad barely noticed. Grown-ups always find ways to explain away the things that don't fit. But I couldn't. One night, when the heat broke and a storm brewed overhead, Dylan came to my room. He looked smaller than I remembered, hunched and uncertain. She wants us back, he whispered. We can't keep pretending. You saw her, right? You saw them all. I nodded, throat tight. The wind howled outside, branches tapping at the glass with skeletal insistence. We have to end it, he said. For her. For everyone. I wanted to say no. I wanted to be anywhere else. But secrets don't burn away on their own. Someone has to light the match. That evening, we armed ourselves with flashlights, matches, and an old can of lighter fluid Dad used for the barbecue. It felt foolish, two kids facing something older and darker than their parents' worst nightmares. But there was no one else. Dylan insisted we wait until midnight. That's when she's strongest, he said, shivering. I didn't ask how he knew. Some knowledge leaks in through the cracks, uninvited but impossible to ignore. As the clock struck 12, we crept outside. The grass was slick from the earlier rain, the air thick with the scent of ozone and earth. Every step toward the treehouse felt like stepping deeper into a story I didn't want to finish. The rope ladder was gone again. But we had our secret. We dragged the rickety old ladder from behind the shed, propping it up against the lowest branch. I glanced up. The treehouse was dark, but I swore I saw movement at the window. Maybe it was the wind. Maybe it was hope. Climbing up, I felt the tree's heart beating slow, deep, almost soothing if not for the edge of dread beneath it. The hatch creaked open and we slipped inside, flashlights cutting ragged beams through the gloom. The girl was waiting. She sat in the corner, knees drawn up, hair veiling her face. The temperature dropped, our breath misted in the air. I looked at Dylan. He nodded once. We know your story, I said, voice trembling. We know you're trapped. But we want to help. She looked up, and for the first time, I saw the hint of a smile, a flicker of hope, or maybe warning. She won't let go, she whispered. Who is she? Dylan asked, voice hoarse. The girl's eyes darted to the darkest part of the room, where our flashlight beams fizzled and died. She was here before you. Before me. She feeds on secrets, on loneliness. Every time someone hides up here, she grows stronger. A cold, wet wind swept through the walls. The door slammed shut behind us. I felt a presence heavy, cold, hateful pressing in from all sides. "We can't leave," Dylan said. "Not until it's over." I moved to the rug, heart pounding. With numb fingers, I lifted it, revealing the trap door. I pried it open and the darkness below yawned wide. "She lives down there," the girl whispered, voice barely audible over the rising wind. Dylan handed me the flashlight. I lowered myself into the cellar. The cold was suffocating, pressing against my skin like wet cloth. The walls throbbed with memories, children's voices, laughter turned to screams, the sound of scratching, always scratching. At the far end, the boxes and detritus were gone. In their place was a single, ancient-looking trunk, covered in dust and bound with rusty chains. I knelt and brushed the dust aside. The trunk rattled, the chains straining. Every instinct screamed at me to leave it alone. But I couldn't, not with the girl above, not with the weight of every secret pressing in. "Help me," I called to Dylan. Together, we pried the lock loose. The trunk popped open with a sigh, releasing a foul, old air. Inside were dozens of photos, children, families, tree houses just like ours. Every pair of eyes scratched out. Every single one. And at the very bottom, a diary, brittle and yellowed with age. I thumbed through the pages. Most were filled with nonsense, childish scribbles, and then, near the end, one clear entry. "If you find this, you have to finish it. You have to let us go. She keeps us because she's alone. Don't leave your secrets behind." The wind howled louder. Something moved in the darkness. Dylan grabbed my hand. "Let's end it," he said. We climbed back up, hearts hammering. The girl stood at the window, staring into the void. I emptied the lighter fluid around the edges of the treehouse, fingers shaking so hard I nearly dropped the can. Dylan struck the match. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a hungry rush, the fire took hold, orange and angry against the midnight dark. The treehouse groaned. Shadows leapt along the walls, twisting into shapes I barely understood, children, faces, hollow eyes wide with relief or accusation. The girl turned to us. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice layered with dozens of others, boys, girls, all the ones lost before. The fire blazed higher, and for one impossible moment, I saw her face in the smoke, not scared, not angry, but finally at peace. And behind her, a shape vast, twisted, angry, then dissolving into the flames. The air filled with a sound that was both a wail and a sigh of release. Dylan and I clung to the ladder as the heat licked at our backs. We tumbled to the ground, choking on smoke and fear. The treehouse collapsed in on itself, sending sparks spiraling up into the black sky. We sat in the grass, watching the flames die, until the first streaks of dawn turned the smoke to silver. The tree was scarred, its branches stripped and blackened, but the presence was gone. The weight that had pressed on our chests, the eyes in the windows, the footsteps on the roof, all gone. Our parents never understood why we did it. They saw only the ashes, not the years of secrets baked into the boards, not the relief written in the dirt where the girl's footprints ended. The club never met again. Dylan never spoke of the treehouse, not even years later when we moved away. But every time I pass a tree with low-hanging branches, I feel a pang of both fear and longing, a memory of the summer the tree watched back. I still dream about her. Sometimes, I see her walking among the branches, sunlight dancing in her hair, free at last. Other times, I see the shadowy thing behind her watching, always watching, waiting for secrets to root in new wood. But I also remember what she said: she feeds on secrets, on loneliness. So I talk. I tell the story, even when people laugh. I keep my windows open on windy nights, listening for the laughter that's not quite mine. I remember the lesson etched into my bones by fire and fear. We think we build places to keep the world out, but sometimes what we're really doing is trapping something inside. And the things we lock away, our shame, our pain, our longing to belong, don't disappear. They wait. They grow. Why did the treehouse need to burn? Was it about banishing a ghost, or about finally facing what we'd all ignored? I think about the no girls rule now, the way we draw lines to keep ourselves safe, to keep the unknown at bay. But the truth is, the darkness was never outside. It was in the stories we refused to tell, the secrets we left to fester. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if we'd welcomed her from the start. If we'd listened, if we'd been brave enough to share the space instead of shutting it up tight. Maybe that's what the treehouse was always trying to teach us about compassion, about community, about the dangers of pretending monsters don't exist just because we can't see them. There's a scar where the treehouse stood, now. The grass refuses to grow, and kids give it a wide berth. But sometimes, when I walk by, I leave a small token, a marble, a button, a scrap of ribbon. A reminder that secrets only have power when they're hidden. That we all need to be seen, to be remembered. And if you ever find yourself somewhere that feels too quiet, too dense with stories unsaid, look closer. You might just find someone, or something, waiting for a bit of truth, a little warmth, or maybe just the sound of another voice saying, "I see you." It took years for me to fully understand what happened that summer. Some nights, when the wind rattles the trees, I still wake with my heart pounding, sure I've heard a whisper in the dark. But mostly, I'm grateful for the lessons learned, for the dangers faced, for the knowledge that courage doesn't mean being unafraid, but being willing to face what hides in the shadows. We don't choose all the stories we live through. But we do choose whether to let them haunt us, or to share them, lighting the way for someone else. So if you ever find yourself drawn to a place where laughter has faded and silence weighs heavy, remember the treehouse. Remember the girl. And remember that sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is let the secrets burn, and watch what new life rises from the ashes. Have you ever wondered what it feels like to forget a friend? I don't mean drifting apart as years go by, I mean their entire presence, their voice, the echo of their laughter, the outline of their face, all slipping from your mind like water through your fingers. One day you remember, the next, it's like they never existed. And when you do remember, it hits like a blow to the gut. Where did they go? Why can't I find their name? Sometimes I think forgetting is its own kind of haunting. It was the last week of July, should have been a patchwork of sticky nights, fireflies, and the kind of laughter that only comes from kids who think the world is still a safe place. But the summer Carter Ramirez vanished, the air changed. The sun felt too bright, the shadows too long, and the evenings once filled with the hum of bikes and running feet were broken by the sound of sirens slicing the dusk. Grown UPS told stories about wild animals and stranger danger, but the kids. We looked at each other and remembered the direction Carter's bike was pointing, straight at the woods, straight at our old treehouse. The treehouse had been silent for years. Childhood leaves behind landmarks, a worn path, a hidden fort, an old scar from a dare gone wrong. Mason and I hadn't set foot in the treehouse since he broke his wrist falling out of it. We all outgrew it, or pretended to. But places like that don't just fade away. Sometimes, they remember more than you do. After Carter disappeared, something pulled at me, a vague pressure, a feeling of unfinished business, like a word stuck on the tip of your tongue. One humid afternoon, with the world muffled and sticky, I found myself at the edge of the yard, staring up at the treehouse's crooked window. Climbing back up felt like trespassing in my own past. The ladder was rough beneath my palms, and every step upward came with a sharp pang of memory. I expected dust, maybe old snack wrappers. What I found was a bright yellow note, nailed dead center to the wall. You forgot him. My blood ran cold. It's one thing to be haunted by a memory. It's another thing entirely to be accused by your own past. I went home that night and didn't sleep. The next morning, I found Mason older now, quieter, his left wrist still bearing the faint scar from our last summer. When I told him about the note, his expression barely changed. It was like he'd expected it, like some part of him had been waiting for the reckoning. The next day, we climbed up together. The heat pressed in around us, and for a moment, I almost believed we were just kids again. But another note greeted us, same handwriting, same color. He's still here. Mason didn't look surprised. He stood there, breathing shallow, then knelt and began tapping along the floorboards. He found a loose one, pried it up, and unearthed a box wrapped in dirty cloth, the edges stained with age and mildew. Scrawled on the cloth in childish letters. For her. No parents. We sat in silence, the weight of 1,000 unspoken memories pressing down. The box trembled in Mason's hands. He looked at me, eyes wide and uncertain. Do you remember her? He whispered. I tried. I really did. Images danced in the shadows, a girl in the corner, always smiling, always just outside the circle. Jenny, maybe. Or was that someone else? Childhood memories blur at the edges, become dreamlike, unreliable. But something about her absence hurt, like poking a bruise you'd forgotten about. Leaving the treehouse felt like deserting the scene of a crime. That night, Mason's words replayed in my head, over and over, we left her out here. Made her invisible. I dreamed of the treehouse, dark and swaying, a cold wind circling its walls. In the dream, 3 soft knocks sounded at my bedroom window, and a voice thin, urgent, not quite human whispered. Remember. The next morning, another note waited in the treehouse. She's waiting. And another. Bring Mason. It felt like we were being herded, pushed into a game we'd started but never finished. The guilt clawed at me. How many times had I ignored the lonely kid in the corner, eager to belong? How many times did we enforce a stupid rule, no girls allowed, and never think about the consequences? Each trip back, more memories surfaced. Her voice quiet, hopeful. Her eyes, tracking every joke, every secret, from the edge of the group. The way she'd show up with treasures, marbles, ribbons, friendship bracelets, hoping to be invited in. How easy it was to act like she was invisible, to pretend our fortress was ours alone. Mason changed after that. He grew jumpier, started sleeping with the light on. He'd text me at 2 a.m. Do you remember her name? Why can't I picture her face? Sometimes I'd find him sitting at the base of the tree, staring up, lips moving in silent apology. The final visit came on a Sunday. The air felt electric, as if a storm was brewing. Mason showed up with a plastic bracelet, pink and green, the letters faded almost beyond recognition. I found it in a box under my bed, he said, turning it over in his hands. I think it was hers. We climbed to the treehouse, each step weighted with dread and longing. The inside was different, colder, darker, the corners sharper. We left the bracelet on the floor, a silent offering, an apology carved into plastic beads. As we turned to leave, a new carving glared at us from the wood, deep and fresh. I still live here. I never went back. Mason moved away that fall, and his messages dried up. But the story didn't end there. Some nights, when the wind rattles the windows just right, I hear it, 3 soft knocks, and a whisper, barely louder than a breath. No parents. No girls. No exceptions. We like to think the past stays behind us, boxed up, archived, forgotten. But places, especially the ones built on broken promises, have long memories. The treehouse wasn't just wood and nails, it was every secret, every friend left behind. It became a monument to what we tried not to see. If you ever get a second chance to remember, take it. The places you forget might be the ones that never forget you. The months that followed were a study in forgetting and remembering all over again. Mason moved away, but the echo of what we'd left behind followed me, a chill at my back on windless days. Sometimes, I'd walk past the treehouse just to see if anything had changed, half expecting to see a new note or a flash of movement in the shadows. Sometimes, I thought I heard laughter, thin, childish, and unmistakably alone. Nights were the worst. I'd wake to the old, familiar knocking 3 times, always at the window, even when the ground below was too far for any living person to reach. And sometimes, in those liminal hours between midnight and dawn, I'd dream of Carter and the nameless girl, playing in the treehouse, their faces flickering and unfinished. The dreams felt more real than memory. I'd wake with the taste of dread on my tongue and the feeling that I'd forgotten something vital. I tried to convince myself it was just guilt, that childhood cruelties haunt us all in different ways. But the evidence kept mounting each note, each uncanny dream, each day I felt watched by something that should have been left in the dark. Places hold memories, but some places grow hungry for attention. A year passed. I grew taller, more distant from the kid I used to be. The town started to heal around Carter's absence, as towns do. People stopped whispering about wild animals and strangers, and eventually, Carter's name became something you only said in a low voice, if you said it at all. I tried to put it all away, to let the treehouse rot and disappear. But memories have their own agenda. One afternoon in late August, as the sun burned low and the air was thick with the coming storm, I found myself once again standing at the edge of the yard. The treehouse looked shabbier, its wood more splintered, the rope ladder more frayed. But it was still there waiting. Something inside me said this was my last chance to make things right. Maybe that's what growing up is, recognizing the moments when you can finally own the damage you've done. I climbed up, each rung of the ladder groaning under my weight, each breath shallow. Inside, it was cold. The box Mason had found was gone, but the bracelet, hers, maybe Jenny's, maybe someone else's, was still there, glinting in the half-light like an accusation and a plea. There were no new notes, but the old ones had faded into the wood, as if the treehouse itself was writing its own history. I sat there a long time, the silence pressing in. I whispered my apologies, not sure if anyone or anything was listening. "I remember you," I said. "I'm sorry we left you behind." The air shifted. For a moment, I felt a presence beside me, a weight on the floorboards, a gentle warmth on my shoulder. Not threatening, not angry. Just waiting. That night, the dreams came back. But this time, they were different. Instead of the usual parade of guilt and shadows, I found myself sitting in the treehouse as a child. The others were there too: Mason, Carter, and the girl whose name still hovered just out of reach. But now, I saw it differently. She wasn't invisible at all. She was the glue, the one who kept the games fair, who cheered the loudest, who offered the last cookie. But childhood is a fickle thing. It prizes belonging over kindness, rules over inclusion. "No girls allowed" was just the excuse we needed to push her to the margins. In the dream, I tried to change things. I tried to reach out, to invite her back inside the circle. But every time I opened my mouth, the words turned to dust. The others faded, one by one, until it was just her and me, and the treehouse groaning with every memory we'd tried to bury. She looked at me then, her eyes dark and endless, and whispered, "You remember me now? That's enough." I woke up in tears, but for the first time, the knocking was gone. From then on, things shifted. The sense of being watched faded. The treehouse seemed smaller, sadder, less alive. Sometimes, I'd see kids from the neighborhood eyeing it, daring each other to climb. I'd warn them off, sometimes gently, sometimes not. but a part of me knew it wasn't the place that was haunted anymore. It was me. Mason sent postcards now and then. He never mentioned the treehouse or Carter or the girl. He wrote about new friends, new places, how he was trying to start over. I envied him that distance. But I also knew that some stories stick with you for a reason. I started leaving small offerings, flowers, marbles, bits of colored string on the ground beneath the treehouse. Not because I thought it would undo what we'd done, but because I wanted her, or her memory, to know she was seen. As for Carter, his fate remained a question mark, a scar the whole town shared. Sometimes I'd imagine I saw his bike, rusted and half swallowed by the weeds, waiting for someone to remember. Time passed, as it always does. I grew up, left home, and made my own share of mistakes. But the lesson stuck. Some places, and some people, should never be forgotten. Memory is a living thing. If you try to bury it, it grows roots and claws its way back up through the soil. Every once in a while, when I'm back in town, I visit the old tree. The house is long gone, storm or fire or time finally claimed it, but the stump remains, roots twisted into the earth like grasping hands. Sometimes, if the wind is right, I hear faint laughter. Sometimes, I hear the knocks. But mostly, I feel a quiet peace, a sense that the past, if not forgiven, is at least remembered. We like to tell ourselves that childhood is all innocence and sweetness, but the truth is, it's also the place where we first learn how to wound and be wounded. A treehouse is just wood and nails until you fill it with promises and until you start breaking them. If you're lucky, you get a second chance to remember. To see the ones you left behind, to try to make amends. Maybe you can't rewrite the past, but you can bear witness. You can say, I see you now. Sometimes, that's enough. If you ever find yourself passing an old haunt, a place you thought you'd outgrown, don't turn away. Walk up. Listen. Leave a token. Say a name. The places you forget might be the ones that never forget you.